Today's topic is workflows to produce contract plans. And I think I said it was suitable for both designers and CAD technicians, especially if the designer is a person who performs some or all of their own drafting. We have those times as well. I'm going to focus on workflows that a CAD technician would use when they get the data provided in deliverables from survey and design. Now, the background of this lovely screen is a schematic that some of you are familiar with. I've also got another picture of it, and I'll show it to you. And we'll see this a couple of times in different forms throughout today. But this schematic I've updated to include the newer annotation publish file and the annotation base container file that can be used by designers to provide civil annotations for other people to use. Typically, it's going to be in a drafting product like a set of plans. This annotation file is stored in the discipline folder and then attached as a reference to the container file in the number 6 civil data folder, along with the other container files. It is then also attached, can be attached as references to, looks like I forgot one of my dashes, can be attached as references to the OP&P file. Or not. It really depends upon who's doing the drafting as to what you attach. But when the annotation-based container file is included, the CAD technician can always attach that to their CAD base file, especially in the need of moving or rotating some of the text. Maybe it's stationing text, maybe it's curved data. And that's the example that I have today. It will be with curved data. All right, let me see where my slides take us to help me focus. I got all of the resources for today out of my brain. No, we've published a lot of information about the design deliverables and about plans production. So these 4 that I have highlighted here are the key documents that I use. In fact, I have them open, and I had them open when I was going through my practice for the demo today. So I would definitely think that you could use those. The plans production process is the one where you see this schematic that I've shown you. I'm going to just drag these over to your screen. This is the plans production process PDF. And it explains about the ProjectWise folder structure. Today in my demo, I am not using ProjectWise. I've got everything on my C drive for quicker response. So my things are not in separate folders, but it does explain what goes in what folder. So that's what's nice about that plans production process document. There's also a plans production slides that I created during, it was a different webinar. A little over a year ago, it might be a year and a half ago, where I went through the process. So this is still good information. The thing is that I have now added the annotation file to this process. There's also the drawing boundary seeds. I'm gonna find my files. There was a webinar about drawing boundaries, and there are slides for this drawing boundary seeds. I highly recommend reviewing this information. I'm going to be recommending today that we use particular seed files, and the particular seed files that we're going to use with MicroStation are going to be the sheet only drawing boundary seeds. And there is another document, it's in our user guide. It talks about all of the different drawing boundary seeds and the reason why I choose to use the sheet only drawing boundary seeds when I put on my CAD technician hat and I say, I'm going to create these contract plans as a CAD technician instead of as a designer doing my own drafting. It's so that I can have the level control out in the individual sheets. I've also got a small project. It doesn't scale up well if I use my level display control in the sheets if I have a lot of sheets. If I have a lot of sheets, I would probably do this differently. So if after today's demo, we want to talk about how to scale this up and do it from a CAD technician standpoint for a larger project, we can certainly talk about that. Those are my resources. Now, in the schematic that I showed earlier, all these folders on the left-hand side for zero temp down through the discipline folders, if it was a designer using a civil product who was doing their own drafting, they would likely stay in that purple highlighted area. They would be creating the OP&P and the cross-section based deliverables. They would be producing, they could produce their own plan sheets and their own profile sheets, their own detail sheets, all from the OP&P file. Absolutely can do that. I'm not going to focus on this process today. The process I want to focus on today is from a CAD technician standpoint. When we use that CAD technician hat, we have a lot more going on in the schematic. It's highlighted by the cyan blue area. And some things I want to point out about the relationship between the files that you are using are going to be important for CAD technicians to understand where the data comes from so that they can see it in their sheets. The data starts with the designer down in the discipline folder, and they're creating these published files. They might attach working files or civil working files, feature files to their published data to help them with their design process. But you'll notice that on this schematic, that little icon is got a gray outline and a gray reference line, which means if it's gray, it will not display. That if we do things correctly, no one will see the designer's supportive work. It will be hidden and only accessible to the designer. But everyone downstream will be able to see the designer's published work sitting in their discipline folder through the lens of the container file. The container files sit in the number 6 civil data folder. They have a direct reference attachment, no nesting, to those pub files. The container files can be referenced into an OP&P, and they should be. The designer should be providing that OP&P file, and I have a minimal OP&P file to show you today. Minimally, they would provide the long plan and the long profile. Those are drawing type models that can only be provided by somebody using Open Roads Designer or Open Site Designer. The profile especially, that's the tricky one. Now, if you are a CAD technician, you can attach that OP&P deliverable, any of those models, the reference attachment, you can make that reference attachment directly into a PL or a PF file, or you could attach it into your CAD base as well. It just really depends. And maybe you aren't a CAD technician. Maybe you are another designer who's making a non-civil base file. Absolutely, you can attach this information that comes from roadway designers and you can create your own base. You would attach it as a reference file to your own non-civil base. Those non-civil base files, those live in the number 3 base files folder. All right, so this is the overall schematic of what a CAD technician, the possibilities, and there's lots of different paths here. And so I have drilled down and I've made it so that it's just some simple steps. So I've got a few of those simple steps. Right. Now, as we are working with our project data, I have an assumption, And the assumption is that our designers and our surveyors have correctly created their container files. This is new to a lot of people. We've only been really using container files for, I don't know, year and a half, couple years maybe. And we have a lot of folks who are brand new to not using the older versions of the open products, the inroads. We have a lot of people who are brand new to the OpenX technology and brand new to the folder structure and the container files. So what do we do when we're brand new at something? We make mistakes. So if you, as a downstream user of those deliverables, maybe you find that something's not working right for you, well, we'll give them, the benefit of the doubt. Maybe something was done incorrectly in the container file. That's typically what happens. And then we correct that, but the person that has to correct that is the person who created the container file. So a downstream user cannot fix something if it was done incorrectly, but you can certainly report it to the person who created the container file, and that person can definitely ask for help. That's what the East team is here for. We'll help you. And I know Geometronics will help with the survey container files. And as we go along in time, we're going to be making fewer mistakes and everything will be going more smoothly. Now, you're going to need to talk with the people on your project team between the CAD technicians and the designers, and there's more than one discipline. And you should have some discussions centered about the questions that are listed here. Who is actually doing the drafting? And is it going to be your CAD technician on all aspects, or are you going to share that? How many plan and profile files, OP&P files, will need to be provided? Do you have detours on the job? Well, you'll probably need a separate OP&P file for detours, separate from your general construction. Do you need erosion control? So get an idea with your project team of how many OP&P files will need to be provided so that you can create the sheets for that. Will the designer be using the annotation files, the annotation publish files? And will there be any annotation that the designer puts into the drawing models of the OP&P file? Like, is there going to be some profile information that you might need to drop into the profile model of the OP&P file? That's a way that a designer can get that annotation in there, annotation that's produced by the civil product of open site or open roads. Also ask the question, did the designer create civil plan graphics in a feature file or a civil file that needs to be seen on the plans? I know sometimes designers will say, I just need to do a simple guardrail flare and I'm frustrated with the tools, so I'm just going to draw these features. Cool. If you're going to put some information in another file, you need to attach that to a container file so that your downstream users can see that information. So make a plan. Work in a civil pub file for those particular graphics, attach it to a geometry container file so that you can attach it to the OP&P file and it can be delivered and seen on the plans. Another good question to ask is, will the designer be providing Excel spreadsheets for the drafter to use in making tables? Now, drafters will probably make tables from spreadsheets that have construction notes, but sometimes there are other spreadsheets. I'm thinking the ADA point tables. Ask the question, figure out what those things will be called and where they will be stored. Typically spreadsheets that are used for making tables, those are stored in the number 3 base files. It's another type of a base file. So talk about it, know what to expect. So you're going to have to do a lot of communication between the designers and the drafters. Now, I have some cautions, and this comes from experience and a lot of mistakes. So be very careful if you are a designer creating those container files. Working files should not be attached to container files. Container files are our lens through which we see your published information. And yes, the published files are down in your discipline folder where other people aren't supposed to go. So you're providing a window with the container file. Don't attach working files to the container files because that's all your, options and stuff that you didn't use. Working files can be attached to your published file. If we remember this schematic, I have a working file down here in the discipline folder that's attached as a reference into the geometry pub file. This working file was just some sketched out graphics, maybe. It's not used at all except for visually, and it can stay attached to that pub file. But when you attach the reference from the pub into the container file, that's where you limit. You say, no nesting. I only want to see this default model from the pub file. And then you don't see the junk. So that's my caution about container files reference pub files with no nesting. I have heard of people using, and they were toying with it in the last year. It's a reference attachment setting called ignore when live nesting. I don't recommend today that we use it because it gets confusing. What happens is the other people, they will look at this container file in ProjectWise and they'll say, oh, I see in ProjectWise that it's got all of these connections. But then they open the file up and they cannot see a file that's attached with ignore with live nesting. They can't see it. And that gets confusing. They go, I see it, the connection in ProjectWise in the dependency viewer, but I'm not seeing the data. So, it's because it was set up to not be seen. Well, just don't make the reference attachment, basically, is what I'm suggesting here. So those are the few cautions. I've gotten several questions recently about what's the difference between DGN files that are in the number 3 base files. That's what we used to use with inroads and power inroads. We use the number 3 base files folder. Why are we using this number 6 civil data? That's because the DGN files are actually structurally different inside them. So the civil data, the DGN files that are created with Open Site Designer and Open Roads Designer, those are going to be stored in the number 6 civil data. The dumb graphics, for lack of a better word, non-civil, those would be in the number 3 base files. Structurally, they have a huge difference. Historically, the dumb number 3 base files, it's right in the user manual. It says DGN files in number 3 base files has an empty default model. There's no graphics in the default model. We don't use it. Instead, we used well-named models that tell us what's inside the model. And that model that's well-named, like TS Design or L-Line Text Inch 100, it contains current and accurate graphics that convey the design intent, but they're dumb graphics. That's the thing. They're not civil graphics. And these these base files in the number 3 base files have no reference attachments. That's the hugest thing that I see. I see it all the time. I'll look at the number 3 base files folder in the dependency viewer and I'll see all these reference attachments. It's like, no, not supposed to have any reference attachments in base files and no point clouds. Now, number 6 civil data, still no point clouds. Point cloud attachments to any data that ends up feeding our plans really messes with our ability to produce PDFs. So do not attach point clouds to pub files. Yeah, don't do it. But in the number 6 civil data folder, you'll see these container files. And also, it's true, the civil files, we work in the default model. And normally, these files will have 2 models, default and default 3D. That's all we have. It's all you need. And that's what we recommend that you use. So what you'll have in your container file is a default model that doesn't have very much graphics. It has reference attachments to the pub files. Our reference attachments from the container file to the pub file is no nesting. We want to see the civil data that the designer has said, I'm ready to publish, and it's right there in their default model. We also don't create other named models in the number 6 civil data folder. ORD and Open Site Designer will create by themselves that default 3D model, and they'll manage it. What I've got here, and then I'll do a demo, is the steps that a CAD technician could go through to create some plan sheets. Now, this is the CAD technician creating the PL file. They'll attach the deliverable, and in my example, the deliverable is from roadway, so it's a roadway OPNP file. And what they attach is the plan drawing model as a reference. And I've got the nesting depth there is 3. That's so that you can see the actual civil data. The CAD technician, in the case that I'm going to do today, is using a CAD base file that has a model in it called plan text, basically. They're going to attach that file as a reference to their PL file so that they can see the text that they have modified. You'll adjust the level display. You'll place name boundaries. When you place the name boundaries, you're going to use sheet only. This will put the level control for display in the sheets, which is probably where you want it, for just a few sheets. You'll have it in the individual sheets. If you have more than a few sheets, you would use, not use the sheet only, but you would use like the plan full or plan notes. I would use a long path, and this allows you to select the horizontal alignment that you will see coming in from the reference. And this is something it's not new, but when I did the original videos, the path that you selected had to be in the active file. That has not been true for the last 2 versions. So you can simply select the line, the complex element that we see coming in through the OPNP file, and select that as our path. And then you can create your drawings, and you can set an overlap, and it'll be beautiful. Then I've also got another workflow. This is for profile sheets. In the OPNP file, we're going to have a profile drawing model that will be provided by the designer. So a CAD technician would create their profile DGN, attach the OPNP file. It's different type of data. You don't need as deep of a nesting depth when you're working with profiles. You only need 2. You'll attach, if you have profile text, you can attach that as a reference also. You'll adjust your levels and place, again, sheet only named boundaries is what I would do. And then I would choose a long path. This is a little bit different. You choose a long path here because you're going to end up selecting, a center horizontal grid line that's going to be displayed from the OPNP profile drawing model. When we select that grid line, it places boundaries along a straight line and will allow us to chunk up the profile into individual drawings. And I have an example of that. All right, let me get into some examples. And if you guys have any questions or comments along the way, remember you can type them into the chat. And let me end that slideshow. All right, let me open up MicroStation. I have created a couple of files to work in, and I'm going to open those files. And it is a plan sheet 01.dgn. I created this brand new. Let's see. I think it's empty. Oh, no, I did make some reference attachments. Awesome. Let me describe the reference attachments that I have. I'm going to open up the reference attachment dialog, and we will see I have an attachment to the OPNP file, specifically to the L Plan 1 model. So you might say, well, what is that? Maybe I should. Let's just make a new reference attachment so I can show you. If I was going to make this reference attachment for the first time, I would change my attachment method to interactive so that I can select the model. So I change that to interactive, make sure I've selected the OPNP, and I'll choose open. When I choose interactive, I get this next dialog. If I didn't choose interactive, this dialog doesn't appear and the attachment is immediately made. That's okay. You can go and you can edit the reference attachment after it's made, but this is a way that you can see all of the different models that are available for you to attach as a reference. There's the default model. That's the model that the designer made all of the reference attachments to the container files in. There are models that use the square bracket and the word sheet. Those are sheet type models. I don't really want to attach a sheet type model. I want to attach the drawing model for the plan. And I can see that there's a plan 1 and there's a profile 1. So into my PL file, I'm going to attach the plan 1. Into my profile, I would attach the profile 1. These are long cuts, basically. So let's take a look at that. Move that. Let's just dock that. Okay. What I see is my OPNP file. I can see if I change my highlighting, really almost everything is coming from the OPNP file. Now it's all highlighted cyan blue. This thing that looks like a sleeve of a jacket, that is the named boundary that was created by the designer in the OPNP file. And so it's actually a shape that's in that file. That's how I can tell it's a long cut, because it's not cut into sheets. It's all one thing. So I can create my own sheets here. I've also got a CAD base file attached. And I'm going to select that with highlight. And if I zoom in, I see that leader lines and cardinal station text. I've got some bearing or spiral text, central curve text is all highlighted. But you'll notice that there's a piece of red text out here that's coming in from the OPNP. That red text is the original text node that came in, and I created a CAD base file. I have this CAD base file, and inside that CAD base file is a model named L-line text inch 100. What did I do for the CAD base file? Let me open up that CAD base file just to show it to you. Here's my CAD base file. I have it open. It has a reference attachment to the annotation container file. That's right. There might be some things that I need to go into the number 6 civil data and attach. If I look at this schematic here, I have my CAD base file open. It has a reference attachment to the annotation base container file, which has the published stuff, so I could see it. Well, I didn't want to just see it. I need to move I need to move and rotate that text node. I needed to edit it and put the E value in there. So I needed to do all that. So actually what I did is I selected everything on a particular level and copied it into this file. Let me open up my level display dialog so we can see. Didn't want to do that. There we go. Here's my level display dialog. I attached the annotation base container file. It was using live nesting with a depth so that I could see the information. I toggled off, looks like all these levels, main text and tick small scale. And what I left toggled on was main tick. Then what I did is I merged it into master to get everything that was on that main tick level into this file, a copy of everything, so that I could edit what I needed to edit. Now, as you probably know, when you use merge into master, that's a merge into master. When you use it, it removes your reference attachment. It actually copies the data into the file, but it removes your reference attachment. So I had to reestablish that, and I reattached it. And then I turned it off so that I could just work with the stuff that I had copied. And I moved it, and I rotated it, and I edited it. And one of the edits that I make is I changed its color to indicate that I edited that piece of graphics. So we can see that the stuff that's cyan blue is the stuff that was edited. And it might be easier to see those edits if I toggle off the text field background, toggle that off, and now we can see that only one of those things is cyan blue. The rest of them are red. So I made one edit. I can check to see if any changes have made simply by toggling on the display of the annotation container file and toggling on, the text that's coming in from that annotation container file. There's the text, main text. And now I see the red text. This is the red text that I moved and rotated a copy of. And so I can tell if that changes. I'll see a difference in the numbers. If the alignment changes, I will see that my copy will be static, so I can keep abreast of changes. But I also expect my designer, if they make changes to the annotation, if they make changes to the geometry, to inform me. Please tell me about it so that I know to go in and edit this text node again, because I want it to be right. All right, so that's what's in my CAD base file. I have that information, and I've already made my reference attachment. Okay, let's go back to my plan sheet. My plan sheet is attaching my CAD base file right there, and it's also attaching my OP&P, but I don't need to see the this level, the main alignment main text level. I don't need to see that coming from the OP&P file. So what I'm going to do is find that alignment main text file with the OP&P file selected and rolled up. It's rolled up, and I'm going to toggle it off. So now I'm only seeing my text, which I rotated and moved because I was preparing to see it better in a sheet. All right, now I had some steps in my document. Let me just see if I can pull that over. Not the right one. There's the plan sheet. Attach the OP&P, attach the CAD base, adjust the level display, place the name boundaries. Okay, my level display has almost been adjusted. I don't probably need to see that perimeter anymore, so I could toggle off the display of that perimeter line. It is coming from the terrain, and I think I've got all the other levels adjusted the way I want it. Oh, I don't need to see this named boundary. That is an S named boundary. Hello. I think I'm inversely sorted. There we go. S named boundary. Okay. Got it. Save my settings. Now I'm going to use the Place Name Boundary tool. It's on the View tab, Place Name Boundary. And I'm going to use my From Drawing Boundary Seeds. And I'm going to choose either Detail Full or Detail Notes. It's up to me. I'm going to choose just simply Detail Full. I'm going to set a detail scale. I want to do inch 100 today. And I should give it a name to begin the sheets with. So let me call it C01 to start the sheets off. It's going to do a 50-foot overlap. And I need to choose along a path. Here's along a path. I am being prompted in the lower left corner, and you might need to adjust your status bar so you can see it. I'm being prompted to identify the path. It's not just identifying the path, it's also going to identify the start point on that path. So what I could do is I could change my AccuSnap to nearest, and now I can get little X's, yellow X's along anywhere along that complex element. So when I hover over it and stay still, it tells me I'm looking at that complex element, which is the L line. That's perfect. I want to start it right there. And now I'm going to scroll out with my scroll wheel and move my mouse. And it needs to identify an ending point. So my ending point will be someplace, again, on this alignment. Let me change my near point. And I'll just say it's about there. And I get the two drawings. Now, when I had Place Name Boundary up, you'll notice that Create Drawing was not checked. I might want to adjust this overlap. I mean, the overlap was fine. Got to get my element selection tool. The overlap was fine if there hadn't been a curve, but with this overlap, I'm going to be missing some information here. I'm going to just try to shift this boundary, and I'm going to shift it just to the left a little bit so that I have a better overlap. There are probably better ways to do that, but that should be good. I believe I tried this and it worked well, as long as I didn't rotate these things, just shifting them kind of in line with their axis. So shift left, up and down would be okay. Now, my next step is to create the drawings. So create drawings is a command that's found in a number of places. You can just simply right-click on a shape that's a drawing boundary and run create drawing. But I can create two drawings, and I can have them named correctly by using the named boundary. We'll call it a manager. It's what you get when you press the little launcher button in the bottom right corner. And what I see is that my group is not named well. It's named C01. Probably should have named it like plans. But what I want to do is change the name of C02 so that it has a 0. And this is a new thing. You used to have to select these and change it in the properties dialog. You can actually do a double click now, and you can change it in the named boundaries dialog. Be careful if your machine is running slowly and you try to make a name change, you might get an abort. Just go ahead and close the file and reopen it. I did that earlier with the profiles, and it opened just fine, and it had made the change. But for some reason, it didn't like me, so it needed to close. Anyway, we can make these changes now to the boundaries right in the named boundaries dialog, which is nice. You don't have to go over to the properties window. Now, in the boundaries dialog, there is a create drawing button. You can also right click. I'm going to right click on the whole group C01. It's really all of the sheets. I'm not going to bother to rename it. And what it's going to do is create my sheet model, no drawing models. It's going to use the detail scale that I set up. So I'm just going to click OK. And it's going to open the models for me. So here's my sheets. This is C02. And we see that it's got the sheet number, and this title block is in the seed. I've also got C01. The level display is controlled right in the sheet, and we can see that that's my text. because it's cyan blue. So I know that that's edited text. All right, so those are the drawings. Let me go into the profile one. I think we have enough time. I'd like to do the profile one because it's a little bit different process. It's actually the same process, but it's applied differently. I don't know that it matters. All right, here's my profile drawing. This is my default model, and into the default model of the profile drawing, I made a reference attachment. Well, let's see what I did. I attached the model called LVERT Profile 1. So remember, when I make these new reference attachments to the OP&P and I use interactive as my attachment method, when I click open, I have a choice of models. I'm going to avoid the sheet models, don't want those. I want the drawing type models. Why do I want the drawing type model? Because if the designer put any annotation into the OP&P file, remember that's one of the places they could have put annotation, it would be in these drawing models. That's where the civil labeler works the best. So I chose the drawing model that says profile 1, and I just attached it. There's no coordinate system to worry about. It starts at 0, 0. You can see how close 0, 0 is here. It's right there. This is kind of a fake coordinate system because it's a profile. The other things that I did, let's see what I did. I did nothing. I just attached it. I'm seeing exactly what's coming in from the OP&P file. And I can see that they did put some civil annotations in there. I might not want those to display. I might. I'm just going to leave them there for now and show you how you cut sheets. So you make your reference attachment. And also wanted to show you that my nesting depth here is only 2. So lots of things can happen. Maybe you attach the drawing and you forget you forget to turn on the live nesting. So if you forget to turn on the live nesting, what you end up seeing in the drawing is only those elements that are in the drawing model. So you can see some annotation was in the drawing model, a grid, some stations and elevations, those kinds of things are in the drawing model. But the data is coming in from a nested reference. So I can turn on the live nesting, and I have the nesting depth set to 2, and I betcha, yeah. See, when I do nesting depth of 1, what I'm seeing is anything that's referenced into the drawing model. Anybody who's created an OP&P file will maybe remember that the drawing model attaches the default model as a reference. What's in the default model? Well, nothing actually. Only reference attachments are in the default model. How do we see the data? We see the data by increasing our nesting depth so that we can see what's referenced into the default model. And then I can see that profile coming from it's coming from a managed model inside the geometry. It's inside the geometry file. So I had to go one level deeper to find that geometry. All right, I've adjusted my level display. Let's say I've adjusted my level display. I'm going to place my name boundaries. We place our name boundaries, and again, I can use the sheet onlys if I want the level control to be in the sheets. So I'm going to go ahead and use detail full, inch 100, and I'm going to call the first one C03. I want the second one to be C04 because I got 2 plan sheets, C01 and C02. So the profiles will be, I don't know, they'll be what they are. Let's see, the group, these are going to be profiles. So let me just name that group profiles. They're going to have a 50-foot overlap. And when I move my mouse off of this dialog box, which before I do that, I want to point out that my mode here is a long path. When I move my mouse off of the dialog, it prompts me in the lower left corner to identify the path element at the start point. So this is where the edge of the cut is going to be placed, the edge of that cut that's going to be attached as a reference into the sheet. So what I'm going to recommend that you do is turn on nearest snap and choose as your path one of these horizontal grid lines that allows you to kind of center. I'm going to move that to the right. That allows you to center your named boundaries. And I'm going to choose, I think, this grid line that is 2 grid lines above the red line. And I'm going to choose to go just outside the actual profile and left click there. Then I'm invited to identify the endpoint. And I've got the AccuDraw cursor is showing on that line that's 2 above. So I can zoom out and zoom in. Anyway, it's 2 above. It's this line here. I'm going to change my nearest point snap again. And I'm going to left click just outside. And it places 2 boundaries. And they're overlapped by 50 feet, which is kind of cool. The path was a straight line. You don't have to select alignments as your path. For the profile, it made more sense to select a straight line as my path, and I've got them coming in from the reference, these grid lines. Perfect. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cut the sheets and show you some other things if we have time. I'm going to open up the drawing boundaries dialog, and we see that I've got a group called profiles, and my first sheet is called C03. My second sheet is not named the way I want it, so I'm going to fix its name. Slow double click. I'm going to insert the 0 and hit enter. It accepted it. And I can select the profiles and choose the create drawing command. And click OK. And here are my drawings. This is the second sheet. When I zoom in, it says it's C04. That's because I named it correctly. And I've got all my data, and I've got a little crummy grid coming from the OP&P file. Well, that's not the kind of grid that we use here at ODOT. We use a different kind of grid. So where do we keep that grid? I keep that grid on the ODOT roadway ribbon workflow. There is a profiles tab, and there is a full sheet profile grid. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to place it anchored to the lower left corner of the sheet. There it is. There's my grid. And what is so cool about using one of those horizontal grid lines is you notice my profile grid lines up exactly with those dash grid lines. That is what's so cool about using one of those horizontal grid lines to cut my sheets. Sweet. Now all I need is the elevations to show, maybe on the inside left, and I need the stations to show along the bottom. How do I do that? Well, what I would do is go to where that information is most readily accessible to me as a CAD technician, and that was going to be in my default model. So I'm going to go back to my default view, and I'm going to select all of those elevations. That's a selection box drawn from the left to the right with a solid line. So it only selects those things that I am completely encircling. And we can see I've got 21 things. They're all annotation cells, which means it's the 21 things. I want to copy those. I'm going to copy them out of the drawing model that I have attached as a reference into this file, and I'm also going to move that copy. The copy command is under the space bar for me. Hit my space bar, hit my space bar. Now I'm not getting a copy command. Okay, so I'm going to right click on that selection set and I'm going to choose copy. I'm invited to set a first point and then set a second point. So I'm actually going to use the near point snap again. And I'm going to set the first point as being just right there at the corner. And I'll use my near point snap again. And I'm going to set them just inside the edge of that boundary there. And I've still got them. I'm going to make another copy. Make another copy over here. Inside that overlap area. Yep. Oh, I need my near point snap. Near point. And then I'm going to position them kind of inside that overlap area. They'll appear on both sheets, but they'll also appear on both the left and the right of the first sheet. The second sheet already has them appearing on the right. Let's get the stations. So I make a selection set, again, going from left to right, just grabbing the stations and right click, copy. Let me copy from, I want to move these up vertically. So let me just choose a near point. I'm going to copy from this point. You know what? Let me choose that intersection just for grins. I want that point. And then I'm going to go to a near point. And I'm going to copy them up. Oh, I should choose. Well, I can choose anything. I don't need to intersect. I just need these to appear inside the bottom of that name boundary. And I'd like them to register. So I'm going to do a near point on this vertical line when I see them at the bottom of the sheet. Left click, and there's my copy. Okay, now what do I see in my sheets? I'm going to go to C03, and what I see in C03 is I see the elevations appearing at the left-hand side. I see the stations appearing at the bottom, and I see the elevations appearing at the right-hand side. If I go into sheet 4, I see the elevations at the left, stations at the bottom, and elevations at the right. So that's how you can do it. And of course, we're not done, but that's how you can get, partway done. Are there any questions or comments? I'm sorry, I haven't been watching the text. Oh, where should the annotation for profile occur? Curve data, pipe data, earthwork. Excellent questions. Annotation for profiles, if it's annotations that's coming from the civil data, the best place to annotate that is in the civil drawing. So that would be probably in the OP&P file in that drawing type model. What you'll see is I've got some annotations appearing here. I've got the VPI is annotated, where the curve starts and stops, that's annotated. Those annotations were made in the drawing model of the OP&P file when the long profile drawing was created. That's where those were annotated. Now, I also added a little bit of information. I used the civil labeler in the OP&P file as the designer, and I added some information. So any information that you as a designer add, that's civil data, if you want to add it to a profile, add it to the profile drawing model in the OP&P. That's a great place to put it. Can you use an annotation file for profile? You sure can. But it's easier, I think, to just put it into the profile model for the OP&P. The curve data, that was done differently. the curve data is horizontal, not profile. So let's see if I still have a connection to the plan sheet. I'm going to go to the plan sheet, C01. And what we see in C01 is we see some of this curve data. I'm just going to hover over this and then zoom in. This is the stationing. This curve data, if we look at that little pop-up box down at the bottom, this is coming from an annotation file, an annotation pub file. So at the beginning, I think I showed you the annotation file. I had attached the geometry. I didn't show it to you, but I created the annotation pub file. I attached the geometry as a reference, and I said, annotate the element. And it annotated the geometry in the pub file. Then I went in and I created a CAD base file because I knew I was going to have to move this curve data. So if we do the same thing, if we select this curve data and hover over this curve data, let's zoom in, we'll see that the curve data is coming from the CAD base file. Well, the designer is not going to put that curve data in the CAD base file, are they? No. The CAD technician attached a reference to the annotation container file, copied the data in to the CAD base file where it's now theirs. It was mine. And I edited it up, I moved it, I rotated it, and I turned off the level coming from, for the same information coming from the annotation pub file, because I didn't need that. Pipe data should come from drainage and utilities. We're still working on that. We don't have a good workflow for that. What I have seen is a couple of designers have said, I'm going to create regular geometry for my pipe runs. And it's going to have a profile so that I can easily annotate it and they could control it. They didn't have to use drainage and utilities to do it. And it's kind of like what we used to do with inroads, where we would just have alignments and we would display those alignments for the pipes in the plans. And you can do the same thing in OpenX, the same thing. And that annotation, it's geometry. So pipe data could be in an annotation pub file. The pipe data could be in a geometry file. The annotation for it could be in an annotation file. Yeah. Earthwork, I would put that information directly on the profile sheet. And so that would be a note that you would probably need to give to your CAD technician, and your CAD technician can enter that directly on the sheet. We're not able to pull that civil data in. Hope that makes sense. Lots of different places. Thanks for coming today.